And when it comes to this bill, nearly every CEO, nearly every economist that we've had on has said it's got to get done. It must be done in order to help the economy. Is that necessarily the case, though? Not everybody agrees. Dan Mitchell, senior fellow at the Cato Institute, is one of those lone wolves out there who says that is not the case. Convince us, Dan.
Well, let's just look at Japan. Japan did something very similar back in the 1990s with the bailout. If you look at the Japanese stock market, it's been flat ever since. Now, of course, they came down from their bubble. Their bubble was unsustainable, but they've been flat ever since. When you transfer money from taxpayers into politicians' hands and let politicians go out there and pick and choose which assets to buy, you're running a great risk of creating an Italian-style economy where you have too much government intervention. I think this is bad for the economy in the short run, and it's bad for the economy in the long run. And I think the Bush administration should be ashamed of itself for its reckless and irresponsible rhetoric trying to scare people by driving down the markets.
Okay, Dan, let's see if we can convince you of the error of your ways. Joining us now, we've got Stephen Moore, senior economics writer for the Wall Street Journal editorial board, one of my favorite white-knuckle conservatives. Hey, Stephen, if we're not careful, this almost mini rally in the Dow is going to talk us right out of any bailout. Would that be a good thing?
That's right. Well, you know, I've been trying to teach Dan economics for a long time. I don't know if I'm going to succeed today. You know, I think actually Dan is right. The long-term implications of this for the economy are negative, but the short-term implications are, I think, very positive. I'm a reluctant supporter of this for all the reasons you've been talking about for the last half hour. If you look at what's happened with the credit markets, they are totally gridlocked. Banks aren't making loans. That is going to lead to layoffs of workers. It's going to lead to people not being able...
But won't banks at some point, Stephen, won't banks, if we were not to pass anything and say, all right, forget it, let's write this out, won't banks at some point have to take risk and have to say, well, I didn't want to, but now I'm gonna?
But the key phrase there is at some point. And the problem is we can't wait 2 months or 6 months or 9 months for that to happen. We've got to try to break this credit gridlock right now.
Guys, hold on. We're going to get to Steve Leisman. He's got some breaking news on the alerts desk. Steve, go ahead.
Yeah. Thanks, Michelle. I know there was some thought about whether or not the House would take up this bill on Thursday if the Senate passed it tonight, but a House staffer telling me that they will vote on a bill no earlier than Friday. The House rules, I'm told, don't allow the bill to be considered until it sort of sits overnight. And, of course, maybe the most important thing I was told is House consideration of the bill still depends on whether the votes are there, whether or not the leadership believes they can bring it. They're not going to bring it up, guys, unless they feel they have the votes. And the question is whether or not this changes in the Senate make that easier or harder to do. Back to you guys.
All right. Another round of brinkmanship.
Dan Mitchell, so we need to do this in the short term. Haven't you heard? This is the little guy is going to get punished here. Main Street's going to suffer.
There are some credit problems with bank-to-bank lending, but out there in the real world, commercial lending and at least non-housing household lending is holding up remarkably well, considering that we've had such reckless rhetoric from the administration. I'm a little confused why Steve's decided to throw his lot in with the lobbyist class and the political insiders. We should not copy the mistakes of European welfare states and banana republics that have governments controlling how capital is allocated.
Steve, Steve, take the last riposte.
I certainly agree that this is a dangerous thing in terms of moving more towards a European model. But this is a critical point for the financial markets. I would fear a total meltdown if this didn't happen, and if it didn't happen on Friday. I'll make one point to Dan. I actually think that for those conservatives who voted against it the other day, they've actually made this bill worse, Dan, because now they're adding FDIC insurance on top of it, which puts taxpayers at further risk. I actually like the previous bill better than I like this one.
Steve, you're becoming such a Washington insider. You're blaming the victim.
All right, gentlemen.
Guys, nice to see you.
Nice exchange. Thanks very much, Bill.